Pate State Speaker Series, Tessa Claus coming in here. Joe Tessitore. Yes, golden voice there of ESPN as we enter the holiday season. Those are real palm trees behind you, are they not?
There is. There they are right there. Remember, the original Christmas included palm trees, so that's where we're at right here.
So
we are. I live in Naples, Florida, so this is the scene here.
And that's as specific as we want to get with address. How are you doing, man?
Yeah.
You've been making the speaking circuit lately. You've been in the booth, and then you came down and you graced the mic there for the Tallahassee Quarterback Club, I believe I saw. And the thing about it is, I didn't know, because you don't run your schedule by me, but all of a sudden I start getting texts from down Seminole Way, hey, Joe walked into the belly of the beast. And I was like, what are you talking about? Oh, he came to the Quarterback Club. So I went and watched it. And I thought it was, you do a lot of boxing. I thought you returned very well. You took, you gave. I thought it was surgical.
Oh, thank you. And excuse me, laughing here as we come on, because you and I were just talking before you started recording. The two of us could BS all day long, as we often do by text or phone call. Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it? The beehive that was buzzing for those 48 hours, which is now it has not dissipated. No. It may have only gotten worse because that's what Twitter fuel and conspiracy theories do. But the people there at the Touchdown Club in Tallahassee are absolutely wonderful. And that was a great night to celebrate some high school football players, to celebrate the phenomenal season that FAMU had and that Florida State had. So it was a wonderful evening that was, of course, intended to be nothing but celebration. But I welcomed it in terms of the ability to speak, to talk about the evening, to talk about the circumstances we were dealing with in college football and the playoff selection committee, and then open it up to the crowd for questions and answers. And they were lovely hosts. I will absolutely share with you, because it was understood before that the Florida State message boards and the Twitterverse was coming hard with threats and let's disrupt the evening. And I hope his teeth get knocked out and all this kind of stuff. That's garbage, man. You got beautiful people in that room that cherish the sport, celebrate their team, are great supporters of the goodness of football mattering in the lives of young people. And it was an honor to be there, and I'm glad you watched it. But yes, I did have to slip and parry and shoulder roll and counterpunch a little bit with the right hand. So we put some of that to work. And I didn't realize it was even being filmed or YouTubed. I saw some dude out there all of a sudden with, what are we doing here? What do we, this is going to be, gotcha. Yeah, we're going to get him. We're going to get him. Okay, whatever. But thank you for watching. It was lovely. And by the way, Jimbo's son was honored that night. So Coach Fisher was there in the room. So here's the guy that's also coming back to Florida State with unique circumstances on the heels of everything that's happened in recent years as well as his recent weeks. And it was so amazing to see Ethan win the Courage Award, because it's a story that we followed for years. And here he is, a high school kicker who's going to be going on to play college football, and he wins the Courage Award. And if you understand the disease that he's been fighting his whole life, there was a chance that he wouldn't be around right now, let alone being a high school athlete, let alone going on to be a college athlete, and to take on every day he does with such courage and fight. And that is a symbol of another reason why football matters so greatly in our culture and society.
No, I thought that was awesome, and that's included. You guys can go search this on YouTube if you want to. It's Joe Tess. It's down at the Quarterback Club in Tallahassee. Reason I was drawn to it was because I thought your interactions were so emblematic of like what I've seen, and I've dealt with it a little bit. I've observed it. There have been other people in our space that have chosen different paths and different approaches with which to address it publicly, but what you said there is so on point with what I've experienced. So what I've experienced is a lot of electronic hate, a lot of in-person, really thoughtful dialogue, and most of the time you get the hate mail and you get the credit in person, face to face. And so I've had some Florida State fans, come at me with spears up, but I've also had many more who do it privately who have said, hey, I disagree with you. Like, I was a guy who thought Bama should have been in, but I also thought the committee went about it the wrong way. So I think both we got the right teams and there was a screw job, which sounds hypocritical if you don't want to hear it through, and I understand if they don't want to hear it through. But I think the whole separation is, okay, the committee made their decision over here. That's one part of it. And if you got a problem with the committee, then you've got a problem with the committee. We've all maybe been there a time or two in our own lives. But then there's this next rung on the ladder that has been climbed by many to think in terms of conspiracy and in terms of there being all kinds of mechanisms behind the curtain, and people who talk into a microphone for a living, especially those who do play-by-play, they could very well be in on it if they have certain letters on their chest and on their lapel and their employer. And I mention that because I used to think like that in baseball. I'm a Braves fan. I used to think that ESPN or Fox was out to get my team because, well, I don't know. I had my evidence, though. I heard anecdotal things said on play-by-play. And so I know you've dealt with some of that. You got a little bit of it in the back and forth in the quarterback club there, but you're not nearly as active on social. So you don't engage this, you just observe it. And it was the first time I've really heard you go back and forth with the words and thoughts come out of your mouth. And I thought it was like dead on. That right there is what I've experienced.
Yes, you're correct. And let me go back here to the Saturday night before the selection committee, where I'm in a position where, of course, every word I say is going to be listened to based on who's listening to it, is going to be heard of what is he actually implying compared to what are you inferring, right? So I'm broadcasting on Saturday night on ABC, the Florida State Louisville game, where obviously it's the last at bat. It's the last data point of what we're dealing with for the selection committee. Nobody had a problem with my broadcast on Saturday night into Sunday morning until 12:30 on Sunday afternoon. Then a group of people have a problem where it becomes, he mentioned Alabama and Texas. Josh, how could you possibly have broadcast on ABC from 8 p.m. on Saturday night to 11:30 p.m. and not frame the landscape of what we were dealing with at that point? If I went on air and didn't mention, hey, we saw what Texas did this afternoon. We saw what Alabama just did. Alabama now has the best win of the college football season. Texas now arguably has the second best win of the college football season. And here's the selection committee tasked with looking at this Florida State team, undefeated, Power 5 champions. A Power 5 undefeated champions never been left out, with a defense that understood what they were tasked with as they entered this game and is playing at an elite, exceptional, national championship level way in front of your eyes. But they have a lot to take in. Am I doing my job properly if I don't frame the landscape of that by simply framing that? Never gave my opinion once, not once, but by simply speaking the words Alabama, Texas, and playoff selection committee, all of a sudden the pitchforks come out the next afternoon.
Yeah, I would have sat there and said, you know what? Someone got to him and how about this? Because ESPN has a deal with the ACC too. He's carrying the water for Florida State. How dare he not mention Alabama? How dare he rip pages out of the history book? I would have been there Sunday night, my friend. I would have come after you. So it's a good thing that you handled it the way you did because, well, frankly, it's your job. And also, I have the benefit to be able to talk to you, talk to some of these other guys like off the record, off camera sometimes. I know what you're really about. Like, I know if anything, it's a good thing to have Florida State come back to the national table. It's a good thing to inject that into the sport. Oh. No one's rooting against Florida State, at least when it comes to people in this conversation here or people on the mic. And I don't know. Like I said, I used to breathe that oxygen, so I get the perspective. I think once I got on the other side of the curtain, I kind of understood 95% of it's BS, and the bias that is in the room probably doesn't work the way most people think it works. And so there's a lot of well, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of myth truths out there.
And also, let's acknowledge this when it comes to the college football playoff in its current form. The system has always been flawed. Both the criteria has been vague, not applied properly, has been misread, misunderstood, and they got away through 10 years with 9 years of not having that bullet hit them. And then this year it finally did. So it's almost fitting that on the last year of the current system, there it is. That's how the thing was built the whole way. And it could have happened 10 for 10, but it didn't. It only happened in the last year. You got 5 Power 5 conferences, right? You got 4 slots. So this was bound to happen at one point. It just happens in the final year. And if you think this system is flawed, I actually think it's more egregious of what we're going to do a year from now with listen, it's always the political structure with all this stuff of getting stuff approved. And I said this, you probably heard me say this in that Tallahassee touchdown clip, because they didn't even realize what's happening next year, where it actually will benefit them. It'll benefit Florida State dominating the ACC and winning the ACC. It'll benefit the winner of a lessened Big 12. But the system next year that is currently approved with this BS of 1 through 4, getting an automatic win, an automatic buy-in, it could only be a conference champion. Really?
Yeah.
We're going to now doubly reward what it is to be a conference champion. We're now going to say that if we applied that system this year, Arizona would have won the Big 12. Like, it would be Arizona. Would be just handed a free pass. Here's your golden ticket. Not only are you in, and you probably shouldn't be in, but we're also going to give you an automatic win into the next round simply because you won a conference.
Fascinating.
College football has always been regionalized and flawed with a lot of hurdles to overcome. We have now reached a tipping point where conferences, as we know them, just boil this thing down to 2 conferences. Just get to where pro football was in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and boil this thing down, because it's going to be a joke moving forward with the playoff system. Yes, it's going to solve a lot of the headaches we currently have at the 4-5 chasm and bridge, but it's going to create more headaches with 1 through 4 being over-rewarded.
All right. So I really wasn't planning on going here, but you kind of dovetailed it to where I want to talk for just a second about something that I think one of the big misnomers in college sports and sports period is present day television numbers are the best barometer for present day health of sport. And I see it all the time. I see people who may or may not be fluent in speaking television and ratings and whatnot. They say, well, look, this game just did 19.6 million viewers. Hey,
right.
Afternoon 3:30 window share was up 4.5% over last year and year before. So that must be a direct indicator that the sport is healthy. When I think anyone in this business at the executive level who is a decision maker would tell you, if they've been in the business any length of time, no. Those television ratings, they're always well downstream of the decisions being made. They're always well downstream of the overall health, if you want to call it that, of the sport. And so I sit here and I look at so many different indicators. And you talk to coaches every single week, just like I do.
Yes.
And you know how bent sideways they are about the structure of our sport right now.
Oh,
they love the game, but they hate the structure of the sport. And so there are so many things screaming in my face. Hey, this isn't healthy. It's not sustainable. And yet I've got a dude with 357 followers on Twitter saying, "Oh, really? Well, look at these TV ratings." And so I ask you, how do you gauge health of the sport? Because it feels a little sick and coffee right now to me, but the TV ratings still say 98.6 on the thermometer, so I guess all is well.
I mean, let's just understand this. It's the second most popular sport in America, and it's not close. There are few things that can do the numbers that college football can do and do them all the time, anytime. And I will give you a great example. As I am sitting back at the start of the season, and all of a sudden Jesse Palmer and I get our schedule, and so we open up week 1, and then we do A&M Miami, and then I think we did LSU, and you're coming up on week 4, and all of a sudden, as you know, because you've documented it so crystal clear, the Coach Prime wave, and all of a sudden it's CU versus Oregon, week 4, ABC 3:30. And Jesse Palmer, Katie George, and I are heading out to do Colorado versus Oregon. And it's right at that point where you know the bubble's going to pop, but you're still going to grab a hold of it for one last run here. When we came on the air and did a first quarter, that if you know football and you watch that first quarter, it was absolutely hopeless that was going to be a competitive game. I can't even remember what the score was, whether it was 14-zip, 17-zip, 10-0, didn't matter, 7-zip, didn't matter. That game was going to be absolutely hopeless that you were going to have a competitive game. 12.6 million people, average per minute, were watching that first half of football on ABC in the most hopeless competitive game you've ever seen. Name me another sport in America outside the NFL that can gather 12.6 million eyeballs, week 4, non-competitive, with multiple other events going on within the sport opposite it. The NBA would kill for 12.6, but it's impossible that it could happen. The NBA literally could not produce those. There is nothing that could do that, all right? So the popularity of the sport, The TV health of the sport is a raging volcano that constantly bubbles and spews. It is just hot lava flowing, baby. You got this thing going, right? Internally, the sport has grown too fast for the infrastructure of yesteryear to handle it. Cannot handle it. And there are so many examples and so many stories, and you can point to a million things with NIL. You could point to a million things with coaching carousel. But the one that really stands out to me is the one that actually has taken place in the last 24 hours, and that's Malik Murphy. That's Malik Murphy. The calendar of college football is so broken, is so damaged, that you have a player playing for a national championship who could determine the national championship, because he actually did this year with 2 games that he started. And he's one thumb follow through hitting a helmet away from determining the national championship in the sport. He has no desire to leave his teammates who he's worked with, who he's fought with, who he's desired a title run with, to leave them behind. And yet he's forced to. He's forced to because of the calendar that the sport has instituted. He's put in this position. Now, you can say he doesn't have to. He can stick it out, all that. With where things are and the calendar that's there, he is put in a position where the young man actually has to say, I do not want to do this. This is happening to me. That's ruined. What have we done? What have we done if we were putting young men competing for championships in position where they have to use this time of the year for complete chaos and turmoil? Because that's what it is. The sport of college football purposely makes a decision and has a structure in place to take the sport from coaches to recruiting to transfers, to put it in a blender on Championship Sunday, the day after Championship Saturday, and hit pulse and mix and blend and create chaos through the national championship. Why? The NFL actually has a structure. It has a formalized calendar. Here's when we play games. Here's when we have free agency. Here's when we have a combine. Here's when we have a draft. Here's when you show up for off-season conditioning. Here's when you show up for training camp. Here's when you all have 4 weeks off. College football doesn't have any of that. And it's harmful if you're in the sport day in and day out. And it's changing the course of young men and their directions of coaches. Do you know what it is to be a college football coach right now?
It's
Do
crazy.
you know how little of a life you have? Can you imagine being the wife or the children of a college football coach right now? You better have these massive buyouts and these massive contracts, because your life is constant turmoil with no security.
Let me tell you what else is about to happen. So as you and I are speaking, the future schedules for the SEC have come out very recently.
Yeah, I watched it last night.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, we've had like 500 million years of crystallizing in our mind what 9-3 means, what 8-4 means, what 11-1 means. Well, now I'm looking at some of these things. I mean, Florida essentially plays the NFC East in the second half of the season, and if Napier doesn't go 8-4, you're going to have people say he ain't good enough. And I'm telling you, I don't have to tell you, but I'm telling people, anyone watching right now, there is a world where your past 10-2 is going to be a future tense 8-4, and is good, by the way. That 8-4 is going to be a quality 8-4. And so on top of all the garbage that you have in your lap in December, and how untenable and unsustainable the path is, and how guys are actively seeking NFL employment. Why? Because it's easier than coaching in college. On top of all that, you're going to have the most warped expectation prism based on reality that you've ever had in college football. And it's all going to be looked at by a healthy chunk of society. And it's going to be summed up as, well, who cares? They make a lot of money, which I'm telling you aggravates me to no end, because it doesn't matter if they make billions. What's possible is possible, and what's impossible is impossible. It's like asking you, hey, Joe, if I pay you $17 million extra per year, will you go do 2 games on the same day? Well, you can't, because they're in the same time slot. But you get paid a lot of money, man. Just make it happen. No, that's not how this works all the time.
I am curious to see what, when you say 10-2 is going to be this, I am curious to see now. And I think next year is going to be dip your toe in the water and see what happens. And I think that's one of the reasons why, well, there are multiple reasons why the SEC didn't go to 9 games right away. But we all know that the reason why there are softer schedules or conferences want to cap where they go to in the past is because athletic directors and coaches wanted to have some guaranteed wins and wanted to have some cushion so that they can maintain their jobs and keep boosters happy and keep checks coming in the front door. Well, now when we go to 12 teams, will a good, hearty, tough schedule in the SEC where you grab 2 or 3 losses still place you in that mix? Or are we going to overvalue what it is to go through some other conferences and have a glossier record at only 2 losses? Because, and this has long been the problem of college football, not all schedules are built equally. Not all conferences are built equally. And that's why I have a major problem with the fact of how much leaders had to acquiesce and had to give way to get next year's playoff system approved. Because that's really what happened here. Everybody went into the room with some great intentions, with some great thoughts of let's just build the best playoff we can. And Swarbrick and Sankey undoubtedly did that. But to then get that thing through and get that thing passed, I think a lot was given way to make sure everybody was taken care of, everybody's happy. And by the way, back to the Florida State issue, we were in position to have a 12-team playoff this year, Josh. You recall that, right?
Right.
There were meetings that took place where certain conference commissioners dug their heels in as a continued reaction of pouting to the Oklahoma-Texas entry into the SEC.
Yeah,
that went on for many
remind
months.
people who that was, by the way, please, Joe.
I don't recall. Do you recall?
Oh, it was 3 letters. I don't think it was SEC. It seems to me it was a little bit further east.
I don't recall, but I do know that we were in position to have a 12-team playoff this year, and that the alliance and that nothing. There were meetings where we should have walked out of those meetings and, hey, we got this done. It was for the greater good of the game. Everybody's happy. Let's move forward. And we didn't. And because of that, this year was still this 4-team playoff. So, and listen, everybody has their own interest in mind. I just think that that was a very awkward period in our sport from summer of that year through the following winter of, okay, like, what are we all angry about here? Like, let's just move forward and make the sport great.
Yeah. You have your own production company. When you guys eventually do the documentary of basically COVID through 2023 college football, you can't call it 30 for 30. It's going to be like a 90 for 90, whatever you want to call it. I don't even, how many hours would you need even after you shave down the final product? Because think about how many stories you're telling. It's like an onion with 17 layers on it. If nothing else happened but COVID, it would be wild. If nothing else happened but NIL, if nothing else happened but portal, if nothing else happened but conference realignment, if nothing else happened but playoff expansion, that would be wild. Mm-hmm. All of it happened in the same half decade, man.
Yeah, and that's why I'm telling you, it was too much change for the system to handle. The system of college football is just one notch removed from what I deal with traveling around the world calling championship boxing. There is no such thing as boxing. There's no boxing league. It's just all these different fiefdoms and promoters. It's a marketplace. It's an economy. Well, college football is not that much further off than that, of not having a centralized organization and a league, of being these tribal fiefdoms that are all trying to agree to something. And because of that, you don't have great infrastructure and system in place. And there was too much chaos and too much change in too much of a condensed period of time for that to handle, because we hadn't yet funneled to where we have central leadership. And without that central leadership, you can't adapt in real time and be quick enough and nimble enough to handle it.
You work alongside Jesse Palmer every weekend.
I do.
I am a guy who watches nothing but college football. So I know Jesse Palmer. I know Jesse Palmer, the college football quarterback. I know Jesse Palmer, the dude who has been on television talking college football for well over a decade now, and he does that. That is who he is to me. I recently discovered, because I've been pulled in different pop culture directions, he does the baking show. He has done GMA. I mean, he's doing every version of The Bachelor there is, including the Golden Bachelor. And now there are rumblings, John, I don't know if you know this, there are rumblings we may have a Golden Bachelorette, which I contend won't do as well, but we'll see. And you sit beside him And the guy does not need to work another day in his life. But I was
No.
talking to you about him recently, and you said, you have no idea. This dude is like a supernova, never
Oh
sleeps
my God.
and grinds and still invests every second into this sport that he always has. And I don't know that that story gets told the way it needs to. So please crank up your plane and just drag the Jesse Palmer banner behind it for a few minutes here. What's it like working alongside that guy, being pulled in like
Well,
19 different
let's start with
directions?
this because you mentioned it, and he'll be so upset that I say this because he's the most humble and modest person there is and self-effacing. He just truly is. He's a true gentleman to the core. He's so wildly successful as the host of The Bachelor, and you can't turn on ABC Primetime without Jesse Palmer hosting a show. You can't turn on the TV Food Network without Jesse Palmer. He's a legitimate, massive TV star. And no, he doesn't need to be doing this, but his passion for college football is unparalleled. He's one of us. Like, he's one of the daily grind guys. He's the endemic media daily grind guy, and he just can't live without it. And when we were together at one point this past year, and by the way, we're as close as family as could be, just so you know. We've been working together since 2007. He's been, in and around my family for years and years. His current wife, we met her as soon as they started dating, and we're, out together. And they've probably spent 6 or 7 Thanksgivings at our home together. So we're as close as could be. We vacationed in, we were in France together this summer, celebrating their blessed news that they're going to be parents. So I have a perspective on Jesse and his life that's unique. He can't go without the sport. He can't go without watching film. He can't go without prepping. So it's been wonderful. I love Greg McElroy, and we had many great years together. But with Greg in his new position, it's been wonderful to reunite with Jesse day in and day out now. I'll give you one quick story. He's filming the finale of The Golden Bachelor, which did monster numbers. He's in Costa Rica. We are doing Zoom calls with coaches. We're literally doing Zoom calls with Josh Heupel. And he's in a rainforest in Costa Rica. And he's watching Tennessee film in a rainforest in Costa Rica. And he's texting me all day long because, these shoots could be 5 minutes with Gary out there and the champagne. And then it's 10 hours of you sitting back in a hut in Costa Rica. I assure you that there has never been anybody who's watched breaking down SEC film sitting in a rainforest in Costa Rica. Jesse Palmer was that guy.
Right.
He was that guy. And that's who he is.
That's listen, that right there will be clipped out of context and used in a future SEC promo spot. Yeah. That's how much it means. You want to know how much more it means? You didn't even know they knew about college football down there. So Jesse Palmer has taken Tennessee football to the rainforest. What an ambassador.
Yeah. He's watching Dragonfly. He's watching all 22 and breaking down Joe Milton from a rainforest in Costa Rica.
That's amazing.
That is fact. And then he also had to do a shoot way up in the northwest corner of Canada, where it was like you land in Saskatchewan, and then you drive like 8 hours. And he's texting me the whole time because now he's watching Florida State film while he's doing that for 8 hours in like the Yukon. So, yeah, he's been all over the hemisphere breaking down film, but he loves it, and he's a joy to work with. And we're also thrilled for his success. And he's going to I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say with this Florida State Georgia Orange Bowl that we're calling the Scorned Bowl, the All Snub Bowl. By the way, let me ask you this, Josh. And speaking of people's success, we're far too deep into this podcast and this visit. And it should have been the first thing I said. But congratulating you on your growth and success with the show. And I've talked to you for years about this. And we talked about the fact that as much as the sport is the second most popular sport in the country, it was grossly underserved for a segment. It was a 1 day a week sport from start to finish. It overtakes everything in Saturday in America. I'm sorry, but if it's that interesting and 20 and 30 and 40 million people every week are tuning in collectively to watch it and go to it and attend it, then where is my dose of it, my good solid dose on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday? There are only a handful of people who have served the fan better than you have with your product. And we know who they are. I just mentioned Greg McElroy. He's in that, and Cole's in that, and a few of the great writers out there. But I can make an argument that very, very few people, if any, have served the fan day in and day out better than you have with what you've hit on in recent years. And I'm a daily listener and viewer and talk to you all the time. But it's wonderful, and it's what the sport needs. So keep it up, and congratulations on all your success.
I appreciate it, man. No, I tell the staff all the time, and I've My dad asks me, hey, do you ever hear from other people
Yeah.
within the industry? And I tell him, well, yeah, you hear from a lot of them, but you learn whose feedback to truly value and whose feedback to just absorb. And you've always been a guy who is not shy about giving feedback, but it's always constructive. There's always logic behind it. And I know
Right.
you take in a lot of stuff in our space. So I appreciated that, man, because you've forgotten more about this stuff than I know and have been doing it a lot longer than I've
That
even
just
been
means I'm
aware you could
old.
turn on a
That's all
microphone.
that means. You see this right here, bro? That just means I'm old.
But I appreciate it, man. Did
Oh,
that?
but where I was going, because I mentioned Georgia, and Jesse calling Georgia and Florida State with me in the Capital One Orange Bowl, is when I think of Florida State and Georgia, and we have this bigger discussion. And one of the things about the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is I do feel like, and I brought this up at the Touchdown Club, where it's always been a little vague as to, well, what's the criteria here? What are we looking for when we say best, or we say deserving, we say rewarding? Why didn't we just take all 6 of these teams that were in consideration and throw them into the bucket and really assess them at the end of the year? Why did we make certain assumptions over here and not apply the same criteria there? Why don't we actually ask ourselves, Josh Pate, do you believe that Georgia, if we're ranking best teams, is the number 6 team in this country?
No, I do not.
Nor do I. Nor do I. And I watched more Georgia film this morning, right? Got my espresso. I just said, listen, I'm going to watch a quarter here. You cannot, with a straight face, tell me that if we're ranking the best teams in America, there is no possibility of that being a true statement.
Yeah. I've never made this argument because it's like an Overton window sort of thing. The argument's been drawn so far over to this side, I wouldn't dare try and pull it all the way to the logical inverse, because the logical inverse is, guys, if you really wanted to boil down to this thing, not only could I ignore your record, I'm not talking about Florida State, I'm speaking in generalities now. Not only could I ignore your record, not only could I just pour water all over your conference record and whatnot, I could just tell you, I think I may have watched the national championship game in Atlanta 2 weeks ago.
Because most likely you did.
I mean, come on now.
Because most likely you did. And having said that, Alabama still has flaws. This is not a vintage Alabama team. What it is, it's a team, and give credit to both Coach Saban and Tommy Rees, that found a way to adapt. They sat back at a certain point and said, all right, listen, these are the ingredients we have. So here's the dish we're going to make. And they did a masterful job of adding to the playbook, eliminating certain things. I mean, the quarterback runs stuff to the outside, which then opens up passing lanes, which then gained the kid confidence, which then saw him blossom into now what he's become, is a credit to what they did as coaches. I mean, that's absolutely just as obvious as could be. But that doesn't mean that they are the team that they perfectly want to be. They're not. What it was is an extremely great coaching job with a kid who did a great job of listening, believing, adapting, and growing. And then an elite defense with pockets of extremely elite talent, obviously off the edge and in defensive backfield, especially with some core guys on the defense in the front 3 that are playing good and doing their job. And then phenomenal scheme with also tremendous defensive coaching that showed up in the SEC championship game, as they made a change there as well, of having Dallas Turner not get caught up into space with the slot receiver, but rather go and impact the quarterback, which you saw the rest of the game. But they're somewhat flawed, but still, I do believe what you said. You most likely watched the national championship game with what you saw the other day.
That's going back to what you talked about a few minutes ago. That's where my biggest concern is about the future and about the expanded playoff format, because I don't think people can visualize something in many cases until it's in front of their face. And so I don't think people can visualize taking your ideal 12-team format but placing it over a Super 2 landscape, because you're still thinking Power 5 version of college football, and it's not here anymore.
No.
And we move in the future. And what makes me so concerned is I have never believed long-term that people are going to willingly fool themselves into believing those playoff spots are of the same value they've always been. You're never going to decrease the scarcity and maintain the value of anything, playoff spots included. And also, you're not going to kid yourself for very long. You're going to see SEC Big Ten football, and you're going to understand there's nothing else that comes close. And you're going to see an 11-1 conference champ from whatever else is out there, and they're going to make the playoff, and they may get steamrolled, or maybe they don't. Maybe they beat up, or maybe they beat a beat-up version of a team from those other conferences, and eventually even the most jaded mind out there is going to look and say, what are we really talking about with the playoff? Making it through that SEC schedule is more impressive than making it through this playoff.
Then why wouldn't the SEC? Now you really want Twitter buzz? You want people to think there's conspiracies and what? These assets are not the same.
No.
These brands are not the same. These quantifiables do not measure up moving forward. They just don't. Okay. So then why is the SEC even, or even the Big Ten, even grouped in with all this? Why are we even putting this forth? If you're Greg Sankey, why don't you run and control your own playoff and produce a champion, just like the NFL did for years, the AFL did for years? And then he said, hey, why don't you take your champion and our champion? We'll meet up here. We'll call it a Super Bowl and we'll see what happens, right? But it was much tougher to win the NFL during those 1960s years than it was to win the AFL. And that's why it was such a monumental breakthrough when Joe Namath and the Jets went 50 miles away from me down here and pulled off an upset against the Baltimore Colts. But if you can say, here's what we are and here's what our brand and asset is, why are you lowering yourself down to then a system that doesn't acknowledge or recognize that? Is it because of the greater good of the game and the history and tradition of the game and this national appeal? Because trust me, I would have no problem of understanding what I'm watching if I saw a playoff among those 16 teams.
Yeah.
And I would understand who, in my eyes, is the best team. I deal with it. I'm a lifelong boxing guy. So I understand different organizations and different champions and I understand who the best is, right? And so I think you could make an argument for that. I really do. And you wouldn't have all this messiness that we've been describing. And then you would also have, you also don't need the NCAA.
No.
You could just set your own parameters and rules.
Yep. Yeah.
You could say, here's the rules we play with. Here's what we think is what we call eligibility. Also, and I sent this to you earlier today because I wanted to share it with you because I knew this conversation would go here. In 2021, Sports Business Journal called me up and asked me what I thought the current state of college football. And then it went viral because I said, can we stop with the sham? Can we stop even dealing with student athlete, scholarship athlete, college football? What you're going to have, and it's going to happen sooner than later, is professionalized football that happens to be a satellite to the brand of the academic institution. So it maintains the history book, the stats, the lineage, the pageantry, the colors, the traditions of the university. It wears the jerseys, it has the band. But it's just a satellite representation to the university. So the kids don't need to go to school. They don't need to stop with the whole, just cut the umbilical cord. What are we doing? If we have 24 to 32 teams that care to play the sport at a certain level, of conduct themselves in a certain level, that are out to win national championships with financial resources that are armies and military budgets of countries, and the purpose of the boosters and where they want to spend their money is on this, then just recognize it for what it is. Stop with the sham of it.
Yeah. And
just tell me these 24 to 32 teams are playing professionalized college football where they represent, they're just marketing branches and arms and representation of the traditions, the grand traditions of the university and the football lineage. But this is what it is now.
And the other part of that
I graduated and I sit on the board of regents of the university that won't do that and isn't doing that. I went to Boston College. My son played at Boston College. We're not going to do that. Okay, that's fine. I understand that. But why are we pretending like we're still competing with people who are doing that?
Yeah. The other part of that is coaches right now are screaming like never before, this is unsustainable. Our schedule, our calendar is unsustainable. We've got to put
Correct.
guardrails on this, guardrails on that. And it's very obvious, it's plain as day, that the only way to do that from this point moving forward is not putting toothpaste back in tube. It's acknowledging it's already out. So let's acknowledge it, like you said, for what it is. And
what are we doing?
Let's go this route, because that's how you get kids locked into a contract. They're employed. So you lock them into a contract. That's how you make sure that you don't have to re-recruit your roster every single November.
Every year?
That's how you make sure you're not having to renegotiate with your right guard before your rivalry game. That's how you make sure that kids aren't coming to you and saying, hey, I'm not playing the rest of the season because I want to maintain my red shirt. You don't have to deal with that garbage anymore. If you go that route, And coaches screaming up the ladder makes their ADs scream up the ladder, and eventually conference commissioners and television executives probably get in a room and figure that out. But I remember, you sent me that, and I remember when that came out, and people were screaming, oh, this is crazy. This is like year 3000 type stuff. Dude, it was 2021 when you did that interview.
Correct.
That's 24 months ago.
Correct. But I'm laughing because I'm not quite sure that the two of us are recording a podcast right now, as much as we're just having a phone call where we're ranting the way we would anyways, what I don't want to get lost here, because I really, by the way, if anybody who's never seen me in this forum before, because to your point, I don't do social media.
Right.
I don't do this kind of stuff. I just try to broadcast games professionally and in a refined way with Jesse. And so I know a lot of people don't see me in this kind of forum of who I totally authentically am. But I love the game, man. Like, I love ball. Like, I love ball, crazy levels of loving ball. Like, I go back and watch games all week long, loving ball. So I don't want to get lost in complaining about the business of college football, but it's back, right? So I don't want to get so lost and so down the rabbit hole that the two of us, people are listening to this and to us like, man, it's just Tessitore and Pate complaining and hating on the state of college football. Yeah, I do hate on it, but it's because I passionately love the game. And I believe in the game greatly. And I believe it's one of the last things we have in American sports that's not diluted and disposable. And that matters. Like, everything still matters in college football greatly. We don't have a lot of that in American sports. American sports, like a lot of American culture and a lot of American product, is quantity over quality. Like, it really is. I know the NFL has got the most eyeballs and the most reach and all this stuff, but with the growth of gambling and fantasy football and the quantity of games, stuff just goes off into the ether and just kind of goes away. That never happens in college football. Stuff just doesn't drift away. Every game matters. Every game's like a movie. Every game's a memorable moment. Every game are alumni with their colors on, where they're all out and it's tribal and it represents their identity in life, right? And we don't have a lot of that. That's European soccer. That's individual moments of combat sports. That's 4 times a year in major tennis and major golf or huge global events. It's more one-off global events. And in America, we become a quantity culture, especially with our sports and especially with pro sports. Especially with pro sports. And college football is the last remaining big-time sport in America where everything still greatly matters. Every event is a standalone event.
Value being
Why do you get me so
defined.
fired up, dude? It's
Well,
12:48 in the
hey,
afternoon.
look,
You got
so
me so fired up.
I was excited about this because you're right. No one ever sees this version of you. But people know street tests exists. I wanted street tests to be put in front of the world because you could come in here and take people's jobs tomorrow if you wanted to shift over to this lane. It would be entertaining. It would be great.
I'm good, man. I like listening to you. You're my boy. I like listening to you every day. I'm good with this, man. I sit up, I slam espresso, I listen to the podcast, I watch games back, I read, I call coaches, I hang, and then we switch over to different beverages at 4:59.
What by the way, the espresso, so I'm drinking something out of a generic cup that frankly tastes like it was filtered through a jock strap this morning. What is your espresso of choice?
Oh, man, I like, listen, so just in the house, obviously, I don't like, Jesse's got the machine now. Now, Jesse's got the grind. He's got the thing straight up from Italy. It's absolutely beautiful. He pounds it out. It's spectacular. I don't have the patience for it, so I just got the nice higher-end espresso machine over there in the corner. But, I love a really good dark ristretto, a very, a nice, just couple ounces. I like bitter.
Yeah.
I like the lemon. I go troppo napoletano, like very old Southern Italian, where I just do a little bit of the lemon right on the edge, and I slam that and get that nice punch there.
Yeah. This right here,
dark and bitter.
I go in the kitchen, press a button, and it just happens. It just happens
like the
in the cup.
Guy.
Yeah.
You're like the Dunkin' Donuts press. Yeah.
Probably not even
more
that
water
fancy.
than it is bean.
Hey,
but it's good.
When you
hey, by the way, the black shirt, excellent look on you, bro.
Thank you.
Swollen up. Look, you got a good pump yesterday. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
There you go. There you go.
You were talking about something. I'm glad you said what you said because, yeah, it does sound like we just took a turn towards negative town the whole day, but it's because of love for the sport.
Yeah.
You get to go on the road every week. I never thought I'd be able to do that. I'm not play by play.
And I know
Actually,
you love it now.
I have less responsibility than you because during the game I just get to stand there and watch it. Like no one's even gauging my words or measuring my sentences.
Right.
I just get to stand there and watch it. But it's so awesome as a kid who grew up in rural Georgia to be able to go see what it's like in Husky Stadium or go to the Rose Bowl.
Right.
I never thought I'd go to those places, man. That was like, I didn't go west of the Chattahoochee River until I was like 30. So it's awesome to be able to do that. But you get to see these venues and these cultures and different just little enclaves that exist. And you realize, wait, these people have been doing this for 70 years, as long as their program existed. And I never knew about it. I just saw the 3.5 hours in their stadium on TV on Saturdays. So I got to ask you, not to leave anyone out, but just to highlight some of the ones that pique your meter. When you get your broadcast schedule and you know ahead of time we're going to this place or that place, where does the red Sharpie go? Like, what are some of the places you can't wait to get to?
Listen, a night game at LSU for me is always very special,
Awesome.
right? So you got to understand, you know my backstory. I grew up in an Italian community in New York. My mother came over from Italy, my entire family, and sports, American sports, was a great way of assimilation, especially for my mother's side of the family. My father's family was already over here from Italy before they were football obsessed. So watching college football, and then, we had some folks that went to Boston College. So I was there when BC, the Texas game and the Alabama game, late 70s, early 80s, and the foodie ride and then whatnot. And that put the hook in the mouth. But then the mid to late 80s of the Tommy Hodson, Wendell Davis, Henry Thomas LSU team. Bro, that team was like that was my, like, I'm an Italian dude in New York watching LSU every week, however I could consume them with that. Do you remember that team?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up on that stuff. Yes.
Okay. So that Tommy Hodson, Wendell Davis, that Henry Thomas team. So, years now of going down to LSU and that still is very special to me, especially a night game at LSU and everything about it, from the goalpost to the painted tiger eye to the tailgating. Like my director, Jeff Evers on ABC, and we go for a morning jog through the tailgate. And I mean early. Like we're doing a game at 7:30, 7:30 prime game. And we're going out for like a 7 a.m. jog. And it's already happening now. Like the gumbo, the coffin, the purple painted coffin with the ice chest and the beer, the booze is flowing. And I just live for it. The smell of the sausage, and it's awesome. So that's about as high on the list as could be. But I've cherished every place I go to. Like I like going, it's a hell of a trip for me, but I like going to Oregon to understand what that's become. Matt Millen and I used to do so many Oregon games back in the day on ABC. There was a time, I think it was 2007 season, I think 2006 or 2007 season, where I was doing the 3:30 ABC Pac-12 game. And then I was doing Oregon games. I did, Marcus Mariota's first game, his first start. I did so many Oregon games, so I always enjoy that. I enjoy USC when they're good. I enjoy every place in the SEC because I've got every restaurant connection in the world now, from starting SEC Nation right through all the games I've always done. I've probably done more SEC games for the last 15 years than any other conference. But I like it all. But Mikey Stadium, and I haven't done a game there in years, but just as an experience, when you're at West Point and it's an autumn afternoon, and here come the helicopters, the Black Hawk helicopters, rising up over the Hudson to Mikey Stadium, and the autumn leaves are in the background, and then the Corps of Cadets marches out, and then here come the Black Knights. I mean, that is like, you feel like a history book is opening up, and you're diving headfirst in, Josh. So you could probably name a lot of towns and a lot of stadiums, and I've been very blessed to broadcast from almost all of them. And I would probably find something that would tell you I can romanticize it or I can cherish it. And that's true, because I do. Listen, I love this. I love the sport endlessly. My family spent probably 20 years being in Chestnut Hill around the reservoir, lined up with cars to be the first 5 cars in so that we could set up tables and grills and do sausage sandwiches. And then BC players would be coming out after the game with entire loaves of Italian bread stuffed with sausage and peppers. I can remember big Ron Stone, who went on to play 15 years in the NFL, sitting there eating one of my dad's giant sausage sandwiches after every home game. So I just, listen, I was a fan long before I was a broadcaster, so I cherish it all.
Dad, if you had doubt whether Joe Tessitore was a real one of us, there you go. That's the green check mark confirmation. But so you painted a vivid picture. It's exactly what Saturdays in the fall are about. That's why selfishly, some of us value Saturdays in the fall more than the commoditized caboose that's attached to our sport in postseason. Don't have a problem with crowning a champion, but you will never surpass the value of Saturdays in the fall. You were talking a little while ago about how you felt for a long time the fan was a little bit underserved relative to how popular the sport was. You know what it was to me? Because I lived the same life you did, a different part of the country, but I saw the same thing you saw. I flat out don't think a lot of people in decision-making positions at networks across the country have ever just perused the quad in Tuscaloosa on Saturday or down in Baton Rouge or in Knoxville or anywhere like that, because you don't need to do it 10 times. You go out there in that ocean of humanity clad in whatever color they prefer, and you realize that's my audience. This is the world. And there aren't hundreds or thousands of these people. There are millions of these people. This is the slice of pie that we need to be putting on air every week. And I'm blessed, quite frankly, blessed beyond measure that it wasn't realized for a long time, because when you combine that with the advancement that was made when YouTube streaming and Facebook Live streaming and whatnot started, it was a gateway. And you look at it, Tess, and you say, this is almost a trick, because if it were this obvious, someone else would be doing it already. And it was one of those rare moments in life where the most obvious path was the wide open direct path. And it just so happens that maybe new technology and new media was ahead of the curve. And it's awesome, man, because now we get to do this and talk about this and with minimal invasion.
Yeah, new technology and new media changes things, because it doesn't mean that geography matters as much. But if you go through the history of media in our country, geography mattered greatly up until new media and technology, because the media capital of not just our country, but the world is New York. And it's specifically probably about a 10 to 20 block area of New York. If you look, we also had a conversation earlier where we talked about how college football actually has no central organization. There is no such thing as boxing the way there is the NFL. There's no such thing as college football the way there is the NBA. So do you know where the NFL headquarters are? They're on Park Avenue.
They're in New York, yeah.
Do you know where the NBA headquarters are? They're in Midtown Manhattan. The NHL headquarters are in Midtown Manhattan. Pro leagues are located there. The media buyers are in Midtown Manhattan, Madison Avenue. Marketers are in Midtown Manhattan. The heads of television, all the networks, are in Midtown Manhattan. So when everybody's lunching together, having drinks after work together, having walkable meetings together, things get done. And also the local culture will usurp what is happening culturally that's regionalized or elsewhere. So if NASCAR was late to the party or college football was late to the party, it's with reason, because their proximity to power, and never forget that phrase, proximity to power. They weren't within proximity.
I just want to pause and marinate on it for a second. So my last thing that I want to hit you with, I can't add anything more onto what you just said. It was beautifully put. My last thing that I want to hit you with, I had a conversation with one of our mutual good friends yesterday, who shall remain nameless. And
but you know it's going to pop in my head in a second,
yeah,
so go ahead.
Yeah, it will. He called me and said, hey, so I've got some people who keep hitting me up and asking for advice or connections, or can you open a door for me? And he asked, what do you tell people when they ask you that? So I'm going to ask you. I'm sure people hit you all the time. I know at that quarterback club that I was listening to you speak at, someone asked you, what advice would you give? So generically, or as specific as you'd like to get, when people ask Joe Tessitore, what kind of advice do you give if I'm 18, 22, 32, and I want to do this, or I think I have skill and passion for it? What do you tell them?
I'm such a bad person to ask, because I'm so reality-based, pragmatic. I never want to curb anybody's um, passion or desires or pursuit of excellence. But I also think that um, higher education in our country, which has become a revenue center and a for-profit and a retail purchase, and we should not have the proliferation and growth of colleges and universities the way we've had over the last 25 years and tuition hikes. And not everybody should be going to college, and we have a paucity of those with trades and skills who could have wonderful high-income earning lives. But one of the things that we've put in the storefront window is being the sideline reporter or the television anchor or the game broadcaster or the host of Entertainment Tonight. And that would be like putting in the storefront window for 18 to 22-year-olds being a Hollywood starlet and a leading man actor. And like part of this is breaks and luck and timing. And I'm not telling you that you can't have a career in sports media or on TV, but a couple things here. When a red light goes on, you're going to know in your chest whether or not this is for you really quickly, like really, really quickly. So you can read all the books and go to Newhouse School at Syracuse and Mizzou and Northwestern and take every electronic media class you want. But let me tell you something, bro. When you know you're live on TV or the red light's on, you're either going to tinkle down your leg or you're not, right? So it's not for everybody. And I don't know that you can learn some things, but you got to be a great writer. And when I say a great writer, that doesn't necessarily mean being a writer in the conventional way. Being a great writer is being a great communicator. It's using economy of words. It's using words that matter. It's being able to funnel things towards a thought that's digestible and expressive and can be easily understood and creative. And we have a generation of really bad writers right now because a lot is written for them, and the standard has been lowered because of social media as to how we communicate. And we have less and less writing out there of quality. The writing we do have, the good stuff is exceptional, but on average, we just are producing and people who I think are not as equipped as they were just a generation ago. So my advice is get experience, put the red light on, see what it feels like, see if it fits for you. So that means college radio, college TV, turning on, your iPhone and getting after it and just seeing if it hits you in your heart and you feel comfortable and it feels authentic. A lot of times for me, when the red light's on, I feel more comfortable than when the red light's off.
Amen.
Huh?
No. You're preaching to the choir there.
You know exactly what I'm saying because you do it for a living,
yeah,
right?
I feel way more comfortable.
You weren't this. Like I've been on TV. I've been working on TV since I was 19 years old, right? And I was on TV at 22. Like for me, it's my life. That wasn't the case for you, but you knew. And by the way, you do because you do what I call phrasing, just the way like Sinatra sings. You understand phrasing when you speak and inflection points and digestible content and economy of words and funneling. And by the way, economy of words is the last thing that we've been doing for now an hour and 3 minutes. We're the opposite of economy of words. But you understand what I'm talking about. You understand when that red light goes on, you're like, and I don't want to swear here. I don't want to be like, but it's like, yeah, man, this is okay. Yeah. Because it takes a little bit of confidence. It takes perhaps a shot of hubris and that comfortable confidence to be it and to live, feel it. And I think a lot of people would surprise themselves of that they don't have that. And that's okay. Like, that's okay. Doesn't mean you can't be a great producer or graphics producer or replay guy or ISO or director. You can still work in the industry. But I think what higher education does and what we do as a society is we sell kids on this idea. And unfortunately, I'm the guy that if a younger relative of mine came to me and is like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, or Mike, but come on, man, go study something. And then you can always do this. You can always give this a shot. But like, man, my son was in the School of Management, got his master's of finance. My daughter went to UVA as creative writer and now is a French chef at Le Cordon Bleu in Europe. And I'm so glad they didn't follow in my footsteps.
Joe Tessitore, friend of the program, as friend of the program is defined. Man, we appreciate it. You've got what? You've got Georgia FSU Orange on
Yeah.
TV. Then you're jetting out and you're doing.
Which I cannot wait to be around Florida State fans again.
Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah, it's like that's their late Christmas present. You get Joe
Christmas
Tess
present.
under the tree right before we throw the tree out. Yeah.
Man.
So
I'm going to come on in and say, welcome. Let's go, Tallahassee.
You're doing that, and then you're going to Rose Bowl. You're doing radio for Bama,
I'm
Michigan,
come out
right?
and see you. We're going to hang pregame. We're going to down on the field pregame. We're going to. How about that? How about that atmosphere
Yes.
when we're there for Bama, Michigan at the Rose Bowl?
Yeah.
What do you think that's going to be like right before kickoff?
Well,
I'm going to wait every last second until I got to go upstairs and call that game on national radio.
Hey, man, think about the blimp shot there now. You've got the crimson juxtaposed to the maize and blue. It's the early kick.
Yep.
It is the Rose Bowl game. It's not just a game in the Rose Bowl
game. Correct.
Oh, it's awesome, man.
It's the traditional 5:00 Eastern, 2:00 Pacific Rose Bowl game, which I really, really like. Although I've, obviously because Kirk has always called the Rose Bowl, I've never called the Rose Bowl. I've done pregame. I've done, all the stuff leading up to. I've been out there many years for it, hosting live events and whatever we've done. Jesse and I and others and Publix through the years have been, I've hosted everything from the Rose Bowl, but I've never done the game. I've done many, many Sugar Bowls. So there's been many times I'm in New Orleans in the Dome watching the Rose Bowl. But it's going to be nice to do the Orange Bowl and then get out there and be with everybody for that, because that'll be very special.
How beautiful does that ESPN...
Hey, there's no producer Jesse shout out. What the hell are we doing?
We're not done yet. Okay. Don't worry. Yeah, but I'm just saying, how beautiful, to stump for another network for a second, how beautiful is that desk shot on the natural surface of the Rose Bowl with the decorative roses in front of the desk?
Very nice.
That is the best pregame, postgame shot that I think any network does all year.
It is, and isn't it interesting that it goes against the grain of what typically is what you think of college game day?
Right.
So I don't have the loud voices. I don't have the excessive rowdy cheering and the signs. I don't have any of that energy, and yet you enjoy it.
Beautiful.
Right? It's quality.
All right, I'm being told in my ear, Director Colin and Producer Jesse would like to say hello
Colin
to you.
With a shout out.
Yeah, Director Colin with a shout out, and he rarely talks. Now he does
a very nice job with his full screens and his video. I can tell he puts his work in. He plans out the show well. He does a very, very nice job. Very good job, Director.
He does. He is a soldier, and so they wanted me to tell you hello. They're just behind the wall over here. If you want to look,
they get no airtime ever. No. It's all about the king.
One by choice and one by mandate. Joe, we appreciate it, man.
Exactly.